Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? I would encourage you to continue eating your desserts, but we must proceed. My name is Morton Blackwell. I am chairman of the Conservative Leadership PAC, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all here this evening. As you may know, the Conservative Leadership PAC has a tradition of entertaining the conservative movement for a price. One year ago, we roasted Ambassador Faith Whittlesey, and she promptly fled to Switzerland. Last fall, we roasted Senator Jesse Helms, and he hasn't been heard from since. Now, your contributions tonight will help organize literally hundreds of thousands of young people for conservative candidates for statewide or congressional district races. Now, perhaps you may be wondering, why we picked Lou Lehrman as the honoree of this roast despite his manifold sins and wickedness. There is a simple reason. We wanted to pick someone who could afford to buy lots of tickets. And it worked, as you see. But Lou won't get off as easily as he thinks. Before this night is over, the red you see across his chest won't be just his suspenders. Lou, the knives are out this evening. To be master of ceremonies, we picked Mr. William A. Rusher. We picked Bill Rusher because we wanted someone up here who was sympathetic with New Yorkers. President Reagan has called Bill Rusher this energetic and articulate champion of the principles we believe in so deeply. New York University School of Law gave him its Distinguished Citizens Award in recognition of his able articulation of the conservative viewpoint. And to the New York Times' liberal columnist Tom Wicker, Bill Rusher is just terrifyingly articulate. It is precisely as a spokesman for the conservative viewpoint on public issues that Bill Rusher has become known all across the United States in the past 20 years. He has been publisher since 1957 of William F. Buckley's National Review, America's leading journal of conservative opinion. A familiar television and radio personality, having served for 4 years as a conservative spokesman of The Advocates, the award-winning program on the public broadcasting system. Subsequently, he was also a regular on ABC Television Network's Good Morning America show, and as a participant in the popular Face Off feature. In January of 1981, Bill Rusher became a regular commentator on the Group W radio stations of Westinghouse Broadcasting, and 2 years later moved to the Associated Press radio network. His syndicated column, The Conservative Advocate, appears twice a week in some 200 newspapers from coast to coast. He's a prolific author with 5 hardcover books and numerous magazine articles to his credit. His 1975 book, The Making of the New Majority Party, sold over 250,000 copies in hardcover and paperback. His latest book, published by Morrow in May 1984, is entitled The Rise of the Right and describes the growth of the American conservative movement in the past 30 years. Those of us who were not mentioned in the book nonetheless retain our friendship. A professional lecturer, he has defended conservative principles and carried the battle to the liberals before audiences in every state in the Union. He was a political activist, one of the 3 men who in 1961 launched the draft of Barry Goldwater for the 1964 Republican presidential nomination, a drive which ultimately transformed the Republican Party. He was a Senate investigator of communism who served 17 months as associate counsel to the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee in the years 1956 and 1957. He's a graduate of Princeton University and Harvard Law School, served in the Air Force in India in World War II, and was an associate for 7 years in the litigation department of Sherman and Shearing, Wall Street's largest law firm. He was a vice chairman of the American Conservative Union and a real builder of our movement. I'm very pleased and honored to have as our master of ceremonies Mr. William Rusher.
Thank you, Morton. It's been a long time since I've heard that whole biographical resume read to anybody. Ladies and gentlemen, including our distinguished guest of honor, I guess is the way to put it, roastee, friends at the head table, and ladies and gentlemen, I want to begin by paying a very brief but heartfelt tribute to this young man you've just heard from. Years ago, in a campaign perhaps best forgotten, he was in charge of the headquarters office, and I was darting in and out on various errands, and I became impressed with his efficiency and his cool under all circumstances whatever. And I made a mental note: hereafter in crises, I want that young man with me, and I have managed many times to have him. He has always been, as you are well aware, an enormous asset to the conservative movement. And his cause is an asset too. In an audience like this, there is always the problem that everybody, or they would hardly be here, is in one way or another distinguished in activity and achievement. And you have to, in view of the time limitations, which are considerable, draw the line. So I know you will be forgiving and patient with me if I confine my introductions to the people who are going to speak, plus a very, very few others. Here at the head table, the non-speakers are three, but I do want you to meet them. First, a lovely lady with whom Morton and I and a few others traveled a year ago, well, 2 years ago, this coming July, around Israel for a week on a special and fascinating trip. Morton's wife, Helen Blackwell. I'd like to meet her. And then two congressmen, one of them, Congressman Herbert Bateman, Republican of Virginia. Hear it for him. And another Republican congressman whom I confidently introduced to you is the next United States Senator from Louisiana, Henson Moore. Out in the audience, I do feel constrained to introduce just a very, very few people to you. We are honored to have with us tonight, representing what the House calls the other body, United States Senator Chick Hecht of Nevada. Where is he? There he is. And, well, I think I will then first introduce from Colorado, Congressman Ken Kramer. Where are you, Ken? Who has the pleasure and honor of escorting tonight one of the true grand dames of American conservatism, Holly Coors. Come on, Holly. And where are Congressman Joe Barton of Texas and Mrs. Barton? Where are you, please? Back there. All right, thank you. One other introduction, a special assistant to the President of the United States in the National Security Council, an expert on Central America, who has, between us, just won a round with people who wanted to pave a Helsinki-type agreement to protect the Sandinistas in return for their promising not to do the things they deny ever having done. The winner of that argument and many others, Dr. Konstantin Menges. And to my surprise, because he is not on my list, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Freddie Clay, is here. Now, we have one message that I will denominate as relatively serious before we get down to the real travesties. This one to be read to us by a gentleman who I am very glad to say now hangs his hat in the daytime in the White House. good friend of all conservatives and indeed all loyal Americans, Phil Nicolaides, has a message.
This is before we get down to the fun part. I send warmest greetings to all those who have gotten together under the auspices of Morton Blackwell's Conservative Leadership PAC to roast Lou Lehrman. Knowing how skillfully your roasters will toss their verbal barbs, I'm sure that everyone is having a wonderful time and will have an even better time. That's the point, that and to help a good cause. 3 years ago, Lou Lehrman resolved to make a reality out of Jack Hume's vision of a citizens' lobby waging a campaign of ideas across the length and breadth of America. Lou accepted the challenge. He founded Citizens for America, and under his dynamic and inspiring leadership, it has become a powerful force. It has accomplished wonders in a very short time. I know. I see and hear the results all the time. On issue after issue, from economic growth and tax reform to the MX missile and support for freedom and freedom fighters around the world. Lou Lehrman and CFA have been there when we needed them. Lou has made a difference, and in doing so, he has shown us the meaning of patriotism in action. All Americans owe Lou Lehrman a debt of gratitude. I warmly commend Morton Blackwell, the Leadership Institute, and all of you for honoring my good friend Lou Lehrman in this uniquely American way. God bless you all. Ronald Reagan.
Thank you, Phil. And now to the meat of the program. In the early 1970s, my memory is a little dim about the details, a young man from Pennsylvania presented himself to me and told me that he wanted to get into New York politics. After questioning him a while and making sure that he really meant it, I introduced him to very few political associates that I thought could speed him on his way, and indeed, he was shortly on his way very rapidly indeed. I was so sure that this young man would do well in New York politics that I counseled a couple of much younger men who were interested in getting in on the action to sort of get associated with this fellow. I thought that stock was going to rise. To their subsequent regret, they didn't take my advice. But the rest, as they say, is history. And Lou Lehrman is now a fixture and a name to be conjured with, not only on the New York, but on the American scene. Tonight, however, like Mark Antony, we have come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The roast is a peculiarly American institution, prompted, I think, by our horror of sentimentality. But it is, of course, at bottom, simply a warped display of affection. I had an experience of this, not in the form of a roast, but a similar thing years ago when I came back from a European trip, and I had had my apartment repainted in my absence, so it was a mess. I knew it would be. All the furniture piled in the living room under a tarpaulin, everything looked like hell. And I went to the office, which I knew would be calm and orderly, and I noticed as I walked in the door of my office that there was a sign over that said library. And I went in, and all of the contents of the drawers of my desk had been rearranged. What should have been in the top right was in the bottom left, and vice versa. All the buttons on the phone had been changed so that the outside line now brought me the switchboard. The switchboard connected me with Buckley's office. Buckley's office gave me an outside line. And my secretary came in rather trembling and said, "I want you to know I had nothing whatsoever to do with any of this." And I said, "Get it all back in order. I will be at the University Club." And I departed for the only oasis of sanity left in my life. Well, I told that story many years later to Keith Mano, one of our writers, and he said, "Bill, don't you understand? That was an act of love." and I hadn't understood. And I hope that Lou tonight takes this equally philosophically. We have slightly revised, but only slightly, the order of introductions of speakers tonight in order to honor the biblical injunction that a little child shall lead them. Our first speaker is a nephew of Bill Buckley's, the son of the late John Buckley. At one time worked for Lou Lehrman and left him for what may or may not have been greener pastures to become the press assistant now to Congressman Jack Kemp. He wants everybody to know that of all the people who have worked for Lou Lehrman and left, he is making the least amount of money in his new job. He was National Review's one and only rock critic. He prides himself on being the only Buckley ever to have written for Village Voice and Rolling Stone. Although I remind you, John, that Bill has even written for Playboy. Ladies and gentlemen, the press assistant to Congressman Jack Kemp and the first roaster of the evening, John Buckley. By the way, I know that he and all other roasters will rigorously abide by the 7-minute rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, very much. It's indeed an honor to stand here and salute my former boss, Lou Lehrman. The last person I saw roast Lou Lehrman was Mario Cuomo, whose name today is obscure to you, in that he subsequently went on to a life of harmless inconsequentiality. As some of you know, I had the privilege of working for Lou in his 1982 campaign for governor of New York. In that campaign, one of Lou's themes was, we live with conditions that are absolutely unacceptable by every standard of faith, morality, and law. This sentiment has been repeated over and over by anyone who has ever worked for him. And there are lots of us. At last count, there were more former Lehrman employees in Washington than alumni of Georgetown University. Everyone who has ever worked for Lou has learned something from him. I learned about supply-side economics and the gold standard. Mark Holtzman learned how to buy an election. Now, everyone who knows Lou knows he is very generous to a fault. I'm not saying he's overly generous with staff salaries, but I do know that 2 interns at CFA will be able to retire at the end of the summer. One receptionist at the Lehrman Institute recently instigated a hostile takeover bid for Mesa Petroleum. As I said, Lou is generous, and a particular highlight of my 2 years working for him was the trip he and Louise took me on to Europe. We crossed the Atlantic on the Concorde and went to Berlin, Bonn, London, Paris, before the trip culminated with a private audience with our Most Holy Father, John Paul II. Now, that trip made of me a permanent convert to first-class travel. And Lou? Seriously, as I look toward 1988 with my present boss, Jack Kemp, conceivably facing Mario Cuomo in the general election, I am reminded that Lou exposed the disease of Cuomoism for what is its chief symptom, namely unctuousness. Now, by using that word, Lou most certainly was not referring to the definition in the dictionary that states smooth and greasy in texture and appearance. Certainly that wasn't what he was saying. I am certain he was referring to its definition as full of unction, especially revealing or marked by a smug, ingratiating, and false earnestness of spirituality. Well, Lou, you were right about that. The governor is characterized by extreme unctuousness, and there are people here who won't rest until they've administered the only antidote, political extreme unction. Lou treated Cuomo with a respect he probably did not deserve. The only chink in Lou's armor was his supreme civility. In several important respects, he is the most intellectually honest figure in American public life. It was an honor to work for him, it's an honor to be here, and I look forward to his beating Pat Moynihan in 1988.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. You know, there are some people who give you, or at least give me, the feeling that you're falling behind in life's race. And this next young man is in that category. He was 25 when he began serving in the state legislature of Michigan. When he was in his third term there, he was elected to fill the U.S. congressional seat that was being vacated by David Stockman, whom you may have heard of. He is such a good conservative that he is targeted every year by the old machine that used to back Stockman. And he has already made an enviable career in the House of Representatives. Rather than follow Morton's policy of reading every blasted thing in the biography, I will confine myself to noting that he was Republican chairman of what is called in the release the Aging Committee's Task Force on the Rural Elderly. And I can't help wondering whether it's the committee that's aging or the elderly. In any case, he has no problem in either direction. If he's aging, he has a long, long way to go. I proudly give you one of the Republican Party's bright lights in the House of Representatives, Congressman Mark Silgender of Michigan.
Thank you. Let's hear it for Dave Stockman. Let's hear it for Lou Lehrman. Hey! I figured I'd get a little bit better than Stockman, Lou.
You did much better.
Oh, I don't know why. I seem to be always follow the footsteps of Dave Stockman, but I promised Lou I wouldn't write a book. That's for certain. Lou's been called a man of many things. I think he's a man of compassion. We were driving here tonight, and we were seeing these poor people lying out in the street, the famous, or I should say infamous, homeless of Washington, D.C., and I said, Lou, from your definition as such a statesman, an entrepreneur, and a political candidate, how would you define homeless? He thought for a minute and thought, well, how about Ferdinand and Marcos? That sounds... We hit foggy bottom. I was losing my way coming here, and he was busy chatting to me about politics and the importance of the Republican Party and his vision for his own career. And I said, I know... And I said, we are on foggy bottom. Now, I know that we're near C Street. This is where the State Department is. Lou, which side of the State Department which side of the street is it on exactly? And Lou, being an expert, in foreign affairs, we had just talked over my position as ranking Republican in Africa, about Mozambique, State Department's policy there, South Africa, Angola, etc. And I said, Lou, can you tell me now? And he thought for a minute, and he says, I think they're on our side. Wrong. Lou has an exciting religious career. Now, everyone accuses me of being so spiritual and evangelical, and I'm honored by that. I've been called certainly much worse, and that's an honor to be called an evangelical. But the truth of the matter is, before Lou's incredible conversion, he and Como, and one of Como's aides who happened to have been a Hindu, were in upstate New York driving to a political conference. And they were lost. They had looked everywhere to try to identify where this conference was. Finally, they gave up. Their tank and their gasoline showed about empty. They're looking for a place to stay. They were in the rural sticks of New York. And finally, after basically running on fumes, they identified this old, rickety hotel way out in the country in New York. The sign kind of was hanging on one wire, and it said vacancy. They knocked on the manager's door. He opened the door, and the three of them stood there and said, listen, we don't know where we are, but we need to stay overnight, and we need to fill up next morning. The manager said, no problem. A block down the street, the station will open up at 6 in the morning. You can stay here, gentlemen, but I've got one problem. There are 3 of you, and I have 2 rooms. But, he says, I have a beautiful place out in the barn. So Lou, of course, being a real nice guy, he says, I tell you what, Mario, you take the room. And he told his Hindu aide, you take the other room, I'll go out in the barn. So they each went in their respective beds. They went to sleep. The lights went down, and the crickets were singing beautifully. Moments later, a knock on the manager's door. He runs there, opens the door, and there's Lou Lehrman saying, excuse me, the deal's off. And he goes, I thought you said you could sleep out in the barn. He says, I can, but I'm Jewish, and you've got pigs in the barn. And the deal is off, forget it. And all the commotion. The Hindu comes running out of his room and says, what's the problem here, sir? And he says, well, I can't sleep in the barn because of the pigs. He says, pigs don't bother me. You take my room, and I'll go out in the barn. So the Hindu goes in the barn, and then Lou takes his room. Everything was quiet. The lights went down, and the crickets were singing. Moments later, another knock on the door, and this time the manager, a little bit frustrated, opened the door, and there was a Hindu. He's saying, the deal is off, I can't do it. And he said, well, what's wrong with you? I thought you could handle pigs. He said, I can, but you have a cow in the barn. You know how our religion is in the cow. So finally, after this commotion, here comes Mario Cuomo walking outside, wiping the sleep out of his eyes. Said, listen, you guys, I can sleep with cows, I can sleep with pigs, and I have. I can handle anything you have in that barn. Nothing bothers me. I just want to get to bed and be on our way to that conference, fill out that tank early in the morning. So the rest of them went back to their bed. Mario Cuomo said, I'm going out to the barn, and he went to bed. The lights went down. And you guessed it, the crickets were singing. Moments later, another knock on the door, and this time the manager said, they're out, the three bums, I'm kicking them out, I don't care who they are, I'm kicking them out. He ran, opened up the door, and there standing at the door was a pig and a cow. Now, I couldn't leave here without telling you the truth about the fortune. Now, we've said he's a man of many things, and he's a man of fortune. And you don't really know how he received his money. Now, his bag will tell you from chain stores and drug stores and such, but that's not the truth. When he had his conversion to Catholicism, St. Peter, which we all know is a Catholic, at least that's what they tell me. St. Peter was so excited, he decided to bring Lou up in the heavenlies. He said, Lou, you've come over to our side. God bless you. And just because you've done this, I want to give you now a glimmer of heaven to take back to earth. So when you run for that high office of your expectations and your hopes and your dreams and your visions, you really know what heaven's like, and you can report back to the people on earth. And Lou said, boy, what an honor. Here I am, just a Jew one day, now I'm a Catholic, and here I am up with St. Peter in the heavenlies. And they're taking this exciting tour of all the heavens. And after a while, Lou said, I have a question for you, St. Pete. And he said, what is that? He said, what's time like here versus the earth? Like, what's a minute on earth like here? He said, well, a minute on earth is as 1,000 years in heaven. He thought for a moment, he said, a minute on earth, 1,000 years in heaven. That's incredible. So the tour went on, and near the very end, St. Pete was so excited to have you as a convert, Lou, that as you remember, he said, I'll grant you, before you leave back to earth, one request. And you can ask anything you want. And Lou thought for a moment. He said, may I ask a question first? He said, sure. And Lou said, what's $1 on earth? Worth up here in heaven. And God says, or St. Pete said to Lou, he said, $1 on earth is worth $1 million in heaven. And boy, he whipped his calculator out, started thinking how much it would cost to run for governor, how much it cost to run for senator, how much it might cost to run for president. He said, could I have $50 on the way home? And Lou, of course, being such a bright guy, didn't realize that St. Pete was pretty sharp too, and he said, certainly, Lou, just wait 1 minute. So Lou is a man of every kind of conceivable season. He's a man of wisdom, a man of judgment, and I'm certainly, Lou, more than thrilled to be here and partake in a celebration for Morton Blackwell in lieu of you, Lou. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman. We now turn to a man whom I've known for many years. I know there are many more important facts in his biography. But to me, the important fact about Buzz Lukens, because this is how I got to know him first, was that he was chairman of the Young Republican National Federation. You wouldn't think it to look at me now or even look at him, but we were, in our day, young Republicans and took it all very seriously. He went on to success and became a congressman from Ohio in 1966 and served in that capacity till 1970 when he had a fling at the Republican primary for the governorship of Ohio, and not winning that was arbitrarily retired from Congress. He didn't let that stop him. This man lets nothing stop him. He went on to the state Senate, where he has served from 1971 to the present and is chairman of the Banking and Insurance Committee. But I have good news for you, ladies and gentlemen. He has already won the Republican primary for his congressional seat again and is going to win it, according to the very best authorities, this fall. So we'll have him back in Washington. I might say that anybody sufficiently inspired by that thought to contribute a little money might well bear him in mind, because I think it is taken for granted a little too easily. This is still a race that needs winning, and Buzz will do his part if we do ours. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce my old friend, Buzz Lukens.
You don't know how thrilled I am to come to a Lou Lehrman roast and ask for money for me. Thank you very much. I'd like to say, first of all, I feel a little bit like a mosquito in the nudist camp. I know what I want to do, I just don't know where to start. You might notice I'm a little light on weight these days. I've got a special diet. I attend only Lou Lehrman victory dinners. One of the marvelous things about Lou, though, is his imagination. I mean, he's loaded with imagination. And I'm often reminded of something like Lou, but that marvelous quote from Einstein that imagination is far more valuable than knowledge. And I think of that every time I think of you, Lou. I wouldn't say that. Another thing about Lou is he's tremendously confident. In fact, it borders on cockiness. Borders on it. I remember several years ago, I asked Lou where he was living during the campaign. He gave me his address, phone number, and I called it a couple months ago, and the strange Italian voice says, "Lou Lehrman doesn't live here. It's Mario, Mario." I know it's hard to get good help, Lou, but you ought to, really work on that. You think it's hard? Ask Reagan. He's also very happy. Lou is always happy. One thing about never down, always happy. But I guess he knows that old quote about happiness is on the way. It's found on the way. It's not necessarily at the end. And Lou always finds that happiness on the way. I wouldn't say that Lou is a great inspirational speaker. I wouldn't say that. But the nice thing about being mediocre, Lou, is that you never have an off day.
That's a good one.
Thank you. I'm beating your average. Now, I heard Bigby talking to Morton, two of our very old friends, and Morton said, "Boy, did you hear Lehrman's last speech?" Bigby said, "I hope so." Lou is known as being an organizational genius. I think it's very true. I think it's very accurate. Lou is an organizational genius. Government's a system that's designed to allow two people to do the work of one. Lou's got a new system that allows three to do the work of one. On his Yale application, they asked him for church preference. Lou said, "Oh, I don't know, something in a little red brick." It only took you 30 years. Lou is not bald, contrary to popular rumor and popular perception. He just simply has the longest forehead in town. I couldn't let this go by thinking in terms of a roast. If we talk a little bit about the recent improvement in Russian landscape at Chernobyl. They asked they asked Lou what he thought about it. He said, well, it's actually, I think it's a great chance to organize tours, get away from the hustle and bustle of New York to nice and quiet Kiev. They asked what the weather was. Oh, I said, it's 2,000 and cloudy. And said, not only that, said, no noisy tour guides. He said, let your Geiger guide your way. One thing about Lou, we don't have to let any Geiger or anybody else, any artificial apparatus guide Lou. In all seriousness, I think one of the men I met, one of the people I met in my life as a conservative the last 19 years, has guided me and inspired me in terms of taking on the giants. And for this, Lou, there is no equivalent to Lou Lehrman. We're grateful for your courage and your conviction. We hope you stick around a long time.
Thanks, Buzz.
Thank you, Buzz. If this begins to seem like a dinner in which the theme is "This is my life," it is because so many of the speakers that you're having here tonight have played large roles in it. The next speaker answered a classified ad in National Review in 1961 and was interviewed by me in New York on behalf of a new organization that was then starting called Young Americans for Freedom. And we thought he had the right stuff, so he was hired as executive director of Young Americans for Freedom and moved on from that in due course after the Goldwater election. He was the man who had the perception to realize that the mailing lists that had been developed in that election could be properly computerized and deployed. The real infantry of conservatism in this country. We had no way of communicating with one another. The liberals dominated all the media. Suddenly, through direct mail and through largely this man, we found a way to communicate so that the conservative in Oregon could learn that you might have a couple of wet smacks running for the Senate there, but there was an awful good one in Florida, or something of that sort, and we were able to communicate with one another with results that are now history. He has become a remarkably successful man in a remarkable number of areas. He has 6 communications organizations with a combined employment of over 350 people. He has his critics. At one point, I looked out over this audience tonight and wondered if this was just the people who were suing Richard. But that's the material for yet another roast. I give you Richard Viguerie. Come on.
Morton, you seem to be indicating a little disappointment that you weren't in Bill's most recent book, Count Your Blessings. Those of us who have known Bill as long as I have, others here at the table, Buzz, affectionately refer to him as War. William A. Rusher. I never knew a person whose initials were more appropriate than Bill's. Talking to some of my fellow roasters before the dinner, and I said, fellas, I think we're really in trouble tonight. I've heard that a fellow named John Lofton was conspiring with this fellow here, and I think we better keep in mind the prayer that Charlie Judd gave tonight to keep our motives pure. Morton, I really want to thank you and the Conservative Leadership PAC for this dinner. The company is great. The food was outstanding, and I don't know if how many of you know this, but the food was catered by the Soviets, and we all know Morton's feelings about deals and trades with the Soviets, and but he got a good price. He got the chicken Kiev at half price. I was so afraid somebody'd use that line before I got to. Morton got to talking to the Soviet caterer who flew it in already cooked this afternoon and said, how How do you do this? And he says, oh, it's very simple. First you heat the city to 2,000 degrees and then baste till it glows in the dark. Okay? But, you know, I don't know how many of y'all know Lou as well as I do, but I've heard it said, perhaps you have too, that Lou was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Well, that's just not so. It was gold. and he liked it so much, he's trying to get all of the rest of us to have gold spoons. Lou was not born wealthy. He, as a teenager, needed work, and he tried a lot of different jobs and didn't find anything that suited him. And so as he became a young man, he was still moving from job to job and moved around a lot, trying different jobs until he finally discovered drugs. And, and probably don't know of any conservative leader who has got his start in dealing in drugs, but Lou has done all right. When I started hearing about Lou years ago, I didn't really know much about him, but we have a mutual friend who's known Lou for many years, Howard Phillips. So I called Howie and I said, tell me something about this guy I'm reading about here. And he began to read the bio in a sense and tell me all about him. And I knew that Lou was my kind of conservative when Howie says, well, you know, his company, Rite Aid, wasn't always called that. It was originally called Extremely Rite Aid. We've been hearing a few Mario jokes here tonight, and we're very much in Lou's debt here because he almost saved us from Mario. You know, Mario's the guy who's going around the country telling us that there's no such thing as the mafia. Can you believe that? He's saying there's no such thing as mafia. Well, hasn't he ever heard of the Gambino family, the Genovese family, the Gambino family, the Colombo family? My gosh, you know, you just wonder about this man. But then he always was a candidate that campaigned as a pro-family man. So, I found somebody also recently who knew Lou very well. I was a little surprised. Lou, I was walking through Dulles Airport recently, and a young lady off to the side there with her little card table with petitions. And it sounded very patriotic. It was pro-nuclear energy, and it seemed like, you know, it was a nice thing there, and I got to talking to her. She knew a lot about you, Lou. I was a little surprised, knew about your deals with the international bankers in Switzerland and the Bilderbergers in Holland and your secret meetings with Kissinger and the Queen of England. Boy, Lou, you're some kind of a powerful man. I was impressed. Lou and I have a lot in common. We both like red suspenders. We both have the same barber. We, although I've been going to him longer than Lou has, we both have a fondness and appreciation for organizations and organizing and the importance that it is to the conservative cause. We all know the great, wonderful job Lou has done in helping to found and organize Citizens for Lehrman. I mean, Citizens for America. We both have had a fair amount of experience in fundraising. Lou has just helped Ed Fullner here and the Heritage Foundation raise $37 million in the last 2.5 years. I mean, that's incredible. That's almost as much money as Lou spent in 6 months running for governor. Lou and I share a fondness for many things, but our political philosophy is one of them. We both share a concern that big government is the enemy of the men and women of this country and not the friend or the ally. We both believe that peace and freedom will come from a strong America, not from a weak and vacillating America, and that we share a concern for uncertain trumpets, whether they're in politics or in our daily life. We appreciate you, Lou, very, very much for your many, many talents. We know that to whom much is given, much is expected, and you've contributed a great deal to our country, Lou, but you have much more to do, and you have many promises to keep, many roads to travel before you sleep. May God bless and keep you all the days of your life.
Thank you, Richard. In a discipline, conservatism, which has led many people in a whole variety of directions. There is something to be said with staying with one point and making it. And I think our next speaker exemplifies that particular characteristic. He is and has been since 1979 executive director of the National Pro-Life Political Action Committee. And there can be very few people who are unaware of what that does or unaffected by its accomplishments or unimpressed by its determination. Mike Wallace of CBS said that Peter Gemma runs the most successful pro-life political action committee in Washington, and he is one of the top New Right strategists. That's not all he's done. One tremendous service he performed was by managing the 1978 primary campaign of Jeff Bell, who is also here, for the United States Senate, which had the highly satisfactory result of ousting Clifford Case from that august body, even though it did not succeed finally in replacing him with Jeff. But Peter Gemma is a man of principle, a man of passion, a man of commitment, and, as you are about to discover, the roaster that every roastee dreads. I give you Peter Gemma.
Well, I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing here, or any of you are doing here. We're here to honor a man that I really don't know much about. I mean, what is there to say about Lou Lehrman? He's an obscure former candidate in New York. Have you read this bio? I mean, it's just, you know, I didn't find anything in there to inspire me to give you much of a speech. He was born, and he lived, and he hasn't died yet. I note that right at the beginning of the bio, though, is clever. He has seen both praise and scorn for his role in the conservative movement. Well, you're not here for the praise tonight, Lou. One thing I want to make clear, and if there's nothing I can accomplish in my short time up here, then to set the record straight about Lou's bio, that it's not in print here, but I'm sure you've all heard the rumor of Lou's longtime membership in the John Birch Society. That is, in fact, not true. Lou has never been, to my knowledge, a fellow traveler of that group. I think the confusion lies in the early years when Lou was getting involved in politics and started up an organization known as the John Wilkes Booth Society. Their motto was, "We get the job done." Well, we're really here, folks, to celebrate money. He's got it, and we want it. Now, sit back, Lou, enjoy it. You're paying for this. Here among the very best friends that money can buy. Despite the best efforts of my wife, Fran, to turn out the major media to this event, I'm sorry to say that most of the major networks aren't here with their cameras. The competition is stiff tonight. Barbara Bush beat out George for Woman of the Year of the USO across town. Woman of the Year. But it's nice to have a break from Bush bashing. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Morton Blackwell roast. Here is the only major political event, left or right, where you will not find a woman speaker. It's a those of you who attended the Faith Whittlesey roast will perhaps remember that, and any other organized event that Morton puts on. But, I mean, just take a look who's here. I'm really, just thrilled to be up here. We've got 4 tables of former CFA staffers, Flat Earth Society, Crime Magazine. What do they know that we don't? We have conservative Congressman Tweedledee and Tweedledum. The former direct mail whiz Richard Viguerie. Now the direct mail litigant. The former YR chairman of 1959. Press flunky from Capitol Hill. And Max Hugel, the spy. We're all here, having a wonderful time. I try to get some kind of inspiration. I came in the hotel tonight and tried to talk to the guys in the street, the hotel doorman, who I've seen various times in coming in and out of this joint. You probably know him, Guido Canula. He's the one with the Walkman radio transplant in his head. He's sort of always moving. I said, what do you know about Lou Lehrman? I don't know, man, I don't know. I said, you know, Lou Lehrman, the drug magnate. He said, oh, yeah, Rite Aid, yeah. So, there's been mention of Lou's generosity tonight. I want to make the record clear I haven't seen a dime of it. You know, it's too bad the conservative movement, and I won't now, that's scratch that from your list, Lou, yeah. You know, it's too bad the movement doesn't have sort of normal people to support our efforts. You know, every time the Arab oil machinations go on there, it all sends shivers down our spines, and every time there's a tainted Tylenol capsule, Lou is affected. Ed Fulner runs and cancels 3 Heritage backgrounders. But right here, I'd really like to say that Lou Lehrman is certainly one of the most insightful and dynamic and positive people in the conservative movement. But if I said it, I'd be lying. I've run out of notes. Basically, what I wanted to say is that if we're here to bury Lou, then his tombstone would probably read, Lou Lehrman, papist, entrepreneur, generous, courageous, and imaginative. But we're not here to bury Lou, we're here to praise him. So, Lou, thanks.
Thank you, Peter. You are very good.
Our next speaker is a freshman congressman, one of those economists that Texas seems to be intent upon sending us. I think Texas is trying to tell us something, perhaps. It says in the biographical data I have about him that as a candidate, Army knocked on 10,000 doors in his district. We aren't told how many of them opened. Evidently enough of them to get him elected. The late John Ashbrook used to tell a story about the man campaigning for Congress, walking around the district knocking on doors with his campaign manager. He came to one door, knocked on it. Man opened the door. He said, "How do you do? My name's Jones. I'm running for Congress here." The man said, "Yes, Jones, I've heard about you, and I want you to know that I wouldn't vote for you if you were the last man on earth," and slammed the door in his face. Jones said to his campaign manager, "Put that man down as undecided." That's the kind of spirit that finally brings you to Congress. And the biographical data informs me still further, and much more depressingly, that he arrives at his office by 7:30 a.m. and often doesn't leave until after 11 p.m. Well, we got you out early tonight, Congressman, so come up and do your stuff. Congressman Richard Army of Texas.
Well, thank you. I want you to know I have to finish so I can go back to my office. Morton, I don't know what I'm doing here. I have to say I'm a little miffed at you. First you get me off the hill at night, and then you set me at the left end of the table.
On their extreme right.
Oh, I see. And then you put me behind Peter Gemma, which confused me because I thought this was supposed to be a roast, not a ham. On top of that, I look at the table in front of me and I see you've got reporters sitting there eating. Obviously, you don't know Army's axiom, you don't feed the hand that bites you. I got up this morning and I read my schedule card, and they usually have things on there that are either not important or not necessary. And it says at 7 p.m., roast Lou Lehrman, CFA. I asked my reception, what's a CFA? She says, Citizens for America. I said, that's a good thing. I thought it was, couldn't find Albany. I didn't know how to get here. You know, I'm from Texas. In Texas, we always drive in a nice straight line. No curves, no hills, nothing. So I got Jack Kemp to drop me off. Being a New Yorker, I figured you'd find him around here. And Kemp and I are driving down the road, and he's trying to explain all this to me, and comes a red light, and Kemp goes right through it. I said, Jack, what are you doing? You scared me half to death. He said, don't worry, Lou Lehrman drives this way. I said, well, okay, and settle down again. Pretty soon comes another red light. Jack, I said, you scared me half to death. He said, don't worry. He says, Lou Lehrman drives his way. Comes a green light. Stops. I said, Jack, what are you doing? You crazy? Lou Lehrman might be coming by. Well, you can pretty well guess I did a lot of talking to God that night on the way down here. Well, I had no idea what I was going to say when I got here, so as is my practice, when I don't know what to say, I ask the Lord for words. I said, Lord, give me some words for Lou Lehrman. Came a pause, and pretty soon I heard his voice says, you want them in Hebrew or Latin? He said, the Lord said, he said, don't worry about it. He says, I just had St. Peter send a letter to all Lou's friends. You know what was in that letter? Don't feel bad, Lou. I heard Vigory had the account. But you know, I do think a lot about religious matters, and it's nice to be here with my favorite Christian Congressman, Mark Siljander. Mark's got a mission. I'm Mark's mission. Mark's always catching me on the floor of the house and asking me to come on up to prayer meeting. He says, we have to get in touch with the Lord. We've got to get the word. We've got to know what to do. I said, Mark, you're up there in prayer meeting looking for instructions, and I'm down here doing the Lord's work. I thought it was funnier than that. You guys won on that one. Now, I'm trying to find out something about Lou Lehrman. I don't know Lou Lehrman. I've seen him in the pictures, but I watched and studied some pictures. We all see his red suspenders. But if you notice, he often wears a belt. Now, you're going to trust a man that doesn't even trust his own pants? Lehrman went up to upstate New York to campaign. Red suspenders and all. This farmer didn't trust him. He said, I'd like to give you my campaign speech. Farmer says, fine, but I want you to stand on that load of manure over there to do it. He says, why? He says, I've never heard a Republican give a speech on a Democrat platform before. You know, 82 was a bad year for Republicans, and some of Lou's friends tried to get him to switch parties. They said, you can do that. And Lou said, no, I can't switch parties. My ears are too small. Now, why would that matter? He says, well, it hurts when they suck out half your brains. I like that one. Lou's pretty well with us on all the platforms, and I wanted to find out about this man. I was absolutely amazed to find out tonight he wasn't concerned about AIDS, and you know I tried to talk to him about it. And finally, I explained to him about the problems. Oh, he says, is that it? I thought it was just for Cuomo's. Some vicious people you invited out. I want you to know that I'm the only guy in this whole crowd that doesn't have a dime of Lehrman's money. Well, we've been pretty hard on Lou Lehrman tonight, and the fact is he has his critics. One of Lou Lehrman's critics was a member of Cuomo's aides, and he said that Lou Lehrman's key weakness was his ideological inflexibility. That's Democrat for he stands for something. Well, I like that ideological inflexibility. I think we have a need for more of that. And if you combine that with some of the common sense and good advice from Texas, you will continue to do for our nation what it's been. So I want to give you some Texas advice. Get them varmints. Thank you.
Now you see why the Democrats say of Dick Armey that he combines the worst qualities of Phil Graham and Jesse Hell. Our final roaster, gentleman not deeply involved as many of the others have been in my particular life, but he has certainly influenced it as he has influenced yours. The biography starts out rather calmly. He, we are told, served from 1954 to 1975 as President and Chief Executive Officer of Brother International Corporation, a joint venture with Brother Industries of Japan. Built the company into a major manufacturer, distributor of typewriters and other business equipment. Well, all right. And then he, from 1975 to 1980, he was Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Centronics Computer Corporation, the world's largest independent manufacturer and distributor of high-speed computer printers. He evidently went from typewriters to computers, like so many of us. But then things began to pick up. In 1980, he served as President Reagan's National Director of, that would be candidate Reagan's, I guess, National Director of Voter Groups for the campaign. As such, being responsible for organizing and directing activities with respect to ethnic, occupational, religious, and other voting groups. With this experience under his belt, he was a natural for Deputy Director of the CIA, obviously. Position which he assumed under Bill Casey in the first administration. He is an extremely successful businessman and political activist, and according to my trot notes here, he's trying to get party activists not to commit to any 1988 GOP presidential hopeful until he picks his man or woman. I give you Honorable Max Hugel.
Can you all see me? You know, before I went to the CIA, I was 6'6". Lou, I'm the last one. You want me to continue? Well, I'm the last one that they asked to do this roast. They called me up and they said, Max, would you mind roasting Lou Lehrman? And I said, what's the conditions? They said, well, you can say whatever you want, but you got to say something nice about him. I said, I'll let you know. And for 5 days, I thought about it. And finally I said, oh, what the hell, I'll think of something. I didn't realize that 50 others had turned it down before me. But I think Lou Lehrman is the greatest. That's not just my opinion, it's his as well. And you know why Lou wants us on the gold standard? Because he's got all the gold. Lou, you got to stop wearing those red suspenders. Gorbachev is starting to like you. But there is something outstanding about Lou. It's the schnoz. I mean, that's a piece of work. I mean, this man is the only man in the world that can smoke a cigarette in the shower and not get the cigarette wet. And they won't let him into Japan. No, they're not going to let him into Japan. They're very concerned that if he bows, he'll hit somebody and stab him to death. You know, Lou, about 2 years ago today, Jerry Falwell told me something truly prophetic about you. He has endorsed George Bush, you know. And Jerry Falwell is never wrong. Almost 2 years ago, I was down at Liberty Baptist, and Jerry told me, Max, I am positive Lou Lehrman is going to be the first Jewish president of the United States. George better hope it's not a trend. You know, Morton Blackwell and his band were trying to figure out how to raise some money for the conservative cause, and they were going to have a rock concert at first. Morton knew all about Live Aid and Farm Aid. He thought it would be a great idea to have a little Rite Aid. Morton knows a great idea when he hears one. We'll get Lou Lehrman, he said. He'll pack the house. And all we have to do is sell 2 tickets to each staff member he let go. And besides, Lou is a great fundraiser. He's got a great gimmick. He tells people that Citizens for America keeps him on the road 24 hours a day. He's almost never home. And he promises he'll keep at it as long as there's plenty of money coming in. It's not surprising that the first check came from Mario Cuomo. And the second check came from Louise and the kids. Last fall, Andy O'Rourke sent him his money. Keep up the good work, Lou, he wrote. I remember when Don Regan was thinking of leaving Treasury. Don Regan, not Reagan, Don Regan was thinking of leaving Treasury. Lou went to see Jim Baker. He said, Jim, I'm thinking of spending more time in Washington. Unless, of course, funding for CFA picks up. The next day, a check came in the mail from Margaret Tutwiler. You know who Margaret Tutwiler? Jack Hume said CFA was having trouble getting money out of Pennsylvania and Connecticut. So Lou bought houses there, and soon the checks started flooding in. You're doing a great job on the road, wrote Bill Scranton. I'm going to throw that one out. Last April, CFA went international. Lou began writing World Leaders. I am thinking of starting Citizens for America abroad. He wrote in a special call for action to the EEC. Unless, of course, funding picks up, Mitterrand sent the first personal check the next day. And when Lou got to Angola, the first thing Jonas Savimbi said was, Lou, what are you doing here? I told you the check's in the mail. I know Jack Kemp was so impressed with your fundraising, he told John Buckley to recruit you for campaign finance director, even though Jack had already promised Ned Regan the job. I guess that's a new application for the gold standard. But seriously, Lou, the conservative movement owes you a great debt for all you have put into the nation spiritually, physically, and financially. Your commitment to the fundamental issues of our day and to the president are worthy of great tribute. Lou, you have done a hell of a job with CFA, building a market share for Dr. Pepper in 435 congressional districts.
That's a real insight.
You got it? Good. Now, I'd like to say one thing about some of the things that we've done at Project ADA and CFA. We have set the agenda for the presidential hopefuls for 1988. I have never seen so many people trying to outdo each other of being more conservative. And what I'd like to know is, where were some of them before Ronald Reagan became elected president? Lou, you are truly a great American and even a better sport. Thank you, and God bless you.
Max is great. You're terrific. You really are.
Thank you, Max. The tributes to Lou are now completed, and it seems only fair to allow him some time for rebuttal. You have probably picked up along the way, if you didn't know before, a few details about his career, so I will not go into it in any great depth. We know that he was born in 1938 in Pennsylvania, that he graduated from Yale, and that he got a master's degree at Harvard in history and government. And then, after his Army service, returned to the family wholesale grocery business in Harrisburg and built it into a major national chain with over 1,270 discount drugstores and $1.48 billion in annual sales. He was president of Rite Aid for 9 years, and in 1982, as we know, resigned from his business positions to run for governor of New York. How heartbreakingly close that was, only New Yorkers probably know or can tell you. And I must say, from a position just not on the inside, but not either on the outside of that campaign, it sure wasn't Lou's fault. He put into it all the effort and talent and money that he had, and it came breathtakingly close through reasons that I think were not basically assignable to him. He then picked himself up, dusted himself off, and has, as we know, continued his career in public service. One of the most important parts of it is his position as founder of the Lehrman Institute, a public policy forum for the study of economics and foreign policy. He is also, as we know, been since 1983 chairman of Citizens for America, the president's grassroots citizens lobby, with local chapters in more than 3/4 of the nation's congressional districts. It's a matter of special pride to me to add that he is and has been for some time now a member of the board of directors of National Review Incorporated and one of the very valued advisors and supporters of our little magazine. I therefore have the pleasure and the privilege of introducing to you the man who has suffered all this nonsense with great patience and good humor, Lou Lehrman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. I am deeply moved by these heartfelt tributes from this distinguished group. Morton, I realize you don't pay any of these people, but you really had to scrape the bottom of the barrel to get these roasters. Now, our respected master of ceremonies, Bill Rusher, is a different story. He's here for a good reason. Bill was promised a free meal. How was your chicken, Bill? Was it worth going through this? Just kidding, Bill. It's really nice to see you spending a little time in our country. What's the problem? Has the threat of terrorism grounded all your junkets to Taiwan and South Africa? You know, Bill says he goes to these countries to analyze the political situation. But the truth is he goes to these places to eat. In fact, Bill told a friend the other day that the worst thing about the growing threat of terrorism around the world is that he's running out of foreign dining spots. Yes, Bill really likes the good life. He's sort of the galloping gourmet of the conservative movement. It is said of him that he is our Imelda Marcos. I didn't write this stuff. And of course, Bill's political savvy is legendary. He never liked Nixon until Watergate. He still thinks Goldwater would be a viable presidential candidate. He fervently believes that John Mitchell was the greatest attorney general we ever had. And I'm told he's the only conservative who knows where Spiro Agnew is and what he's doing. Or is it Spiro, Bill? Spiro, yes, Spiro. Speaking of sharp politicians, how about Donald E. Buzz Lukens? What a pleasant surprise to see you here, Buzz. You all know, of course, that Buzz is on loan to us tonight from the Museum of Natural History. Where he is permanently on exhibit as the world's oldest living young Republican. But seriously, Buzz is a unique individual. Do you know another guy who's used a U.S. congressional seat as a stepping stone to an Ohio State Senate seat? Talk about political savvy. That's your middle name, Buzz. And speaking about names, Buzz, by the way, is that one or two or more Z's? I understand that you are now over 70 and that you are going to change your name to something more mature, like Butch or Biff. But I like Buzz. Buzz. Please don't change it. You could no longer be conservative. Well, strike that one. By the way, Buzz, I saw Barbie Wells in the lobby. She has a baseball bat, and she looked very, very angry. That's a very insider, too. I don't even know what that one means. And there's my friend. No, the one who's looking to the right over there. John Lofton's good friend, Richard Viguerie. I have a lot to say about Richard. You know, he's the wizard of direct mail, Richard Viguerie, who, in his intimate memos to me, writes me as Dear Occupant. Richard, it's very encouraging to see you outside of a courtroom. I mean that. But the heat is really on, Richard. I hear even his Christmas card list has been subpoenaed. And a federal district court judge has just enjoined him from writing interoffice memos. I'm sure some people will ridicule your operation, Richard. Not me. I know it's not easy to run a big business like yours solely on the life savings of that 83-year-old woman in Arkansas. Let me finish. That 83-year-old woman in Arkansas who was John Connally's only delegate in 1976. As a businessman, I sympathize with you, Richard. And while spending 150% of a client's fee does seem like a lot to make a mailing, I'm sure, friend, that there's an honest explanation for this, Yes, there's an honest explanation for this, but as they say here in Washington, this is a matter for the grand jury to decide. And when this grand jury does decide, I'm sure you won't spend much time in jail. And Dick Armey. He's a former economics professor and now a distinguished member of Congress. No wonder he's against comparable worth. If we had it, he would actually have to earn a living. In fact, when I called Dick Armey's office, none of the staffers knew him. For it's been his dedication. This is a guy who actually slept in the House gymnasium for months and now sleeps on a couch in his office. But you must understand that Dick was born and raised in, you better believe it, this is it, can-do North Dakota. Apparently Dick has had a hard time learning the players here in Washington. Can-do is in North Dakota. I'm told that when he met an official of the Communist Chinese government, Dick actually asked him if he knew an economist friend of his from Taiwan. This is really true. This is true. I'm not roasting my friend Dick Armey. That is a fact. I mean, you know it's a fact. That's okay, Dick. These things are complex in Washington. I know. Now, I probably would have won in 1982 if I had used the campaign technique that Dick Armey used so effectively in 1984, sending coloring books to all the voters in his congressional district. That's true, Dick. You know that's true. A negative campaign using coloring books. Can you imagine if I had tried something like Dick Armey did to explain macroeconomics? See Lou Lehrman. Color his suspenders red. Color his wallet green. Color the brick in his hand gold. Very clever, Dick. Very clever. Now, how about that Mark Siljander? He's a real piece of work, isn't he? Mark's also a real intellectual. You'd expect that from a former student of Congressman Howard Wolpe. Right? That's right. That's right. He was. Just how smart is Mark Siljander? He barely got a C in Wolpe's class. That's true. That's true, isn't it, Mark? Once at a high school track meet, back when Mark was a javelin thrower, his team won the coin toss, and he elected to receive. Smart guy, that Mark Siljander. You know that Mark is also very religious. I didn't realize how religious until he asked me one day to go jogging with him across the tidal basin. That's true. Not around the tidal basin, but across the tidal basin. Jerry Falwell once called Mark a national treasure. Quote, a national treasure, unquote, which is true and explains a lot about why we have $1 trillion national debt. But I don't want to be misunderstood. Mark is no religious nut. No, not at all. I first met Mark at a BYOS, bring your own serpent, snake handling party, where you had to speak in tongues just to get in. I didn't write that one either. We are especially honored also tonight to have with us one of our great ex-public servants, Max Hugel. or as he was known when he was working for the CIA, Mad Max. That's right. Now I hope Bill Casey doesn't have me arrested for revealing that Max used to work for the company, because I'm not really revealing very much. In fact, when I asked for his bio sheet from the CIA, they sent me a blank sheet of paper, and I was told not to quote from it. But I do know that at the CIA, Max was fighting the good fight, even if he wasn't able to get those nuclear weapons to the Contras. And while the New York Times may not know who wrote that murder manual, we know, Max, we know. And John Buckley. John Buckley. What an honor it is to be roasted by this young man, who has been called the brains behind Jack Kemp. This tells us a lot about the future of the Kemp campaign. Buckley was the brains behind the 1982 Lehrman victory campaign. Some victory, John. Jack Kemp is a bold man. What other conservative presidential candidate would hire, as the brains of his operation, an ex-rock and roll critic for The Village Voice? That's true, The Village Voice. John taught me everything I know about rock music. He really worships those rock stars. Even now, we're in a fierce dispute about who is the real Madonna. John is a real wordsmith with a definite gift of gab. Who else but John Buckley could have told Time magazine that Jack Kemp had a better shot at the presidency than Ronald Reagan because Jack is even dumber than Reagan? You read it. You did. Oh, I know, John. Self-effacing young man that you are, you tried to say you didn't make those brilliant remarks. But don't be bashful, John. When you hit the nail on the head, admit it. If you deserve the credit, take it. It's the American way. Besides, only several million people read Time, John. And anyway, they still have lots of jobs open at the Village Voice. I really appreciate Peter Gemma's contribution here tonight. But this isn't the only lousy job Peter has had. He once worked for the mayor of Providence, Rhode Island. I've done my homework, Peter. This is a mayor who had a run-in with the law, barely avoided jail, and I believe is now a disc jockey somewhere. That's true. That's right, isn't it? Am I right about this in every detail? Good. I believe you also worked as the campaign manager for a Maine preacher. Oh, no. We paid big money for our research. As you said, Peter, this Maine preacher was defrocked and kicked out of his job because he was an adulterer. Well, Peter, you might want to get this guy together with Mark Siljander and see if Mark can give him absolution for this sin. It's just a thought, Peter. I'm trying to help, and boy, do you need help. More seriously, Peter, we all make mistakes. It's just that most of us don't make a career of making mistakes. And now, Peter, your ultimate indignity, your last indignity, being a roaster at yet one more Morton Blackwell bomb. And now a moment for the truth of my feelings. Mark Siljander, no congressman than whom I am more deeply committed to. and in whom there is any greater promise for making our country the place we all work for. John Buckley, a vision of what every candidate must have in mind if he seeks a high office in this country, and holds him to that standard. Buzz Lukens, one of the first men I met on my trek for CFA, who unstintingly gave me of himself, as he has always done for you and for our country. Richard Viguerie, whom I came into conservative public life with, whom I look up to, who has made a conservative majority a possibility, not just something that we all dreamed about. Peter Gemma, who has made again in American life the proposition of the American experiment a living reality, the declaration that all men are created equal by God and endowed with the unalienable right to life. Richard Army, not only a Texan with the spirit of them all, but the brains and the education and the commitment to the free enterprise system, which should make of the Congress a conservative Republican majority. Max Hugel, unstintingly from the beginning of his financial independence, giving more back to his country than was ever given to him. Of these men, I sing a certain praise. We have all had a lot of fun tonight. True and deep thanks especially to Mort Blackwell, all my friends and roasters, to the distinguished congressmen, senators, cabinet officers who have taken of their time, and you, my friends, to all of you, you and I are going to finish this conservative revolution. Thank you very much.
Lou, as a memento for this evening, I want to present to you this plaque, and I'll read it out. The Lou Lehrman Roast, sponsored by the Conservative Leadership PAC, May 14th, 1986, in Arlington, Virginia. With distinguished patron citizens for America, Mr. and Mrs. Jacqueline Hume, I Love America Committee of the Heritage Foundation, and sponsors the America's Political Action Committee, National Right to Work PAC, Christian Voice, Richard A. Viguerie, Campaign for Prosperity, Governor Pete DuPont, Crime Magazine, Black Manafort, Stone and Atwater, National Tax Limitation Committee, Conservative Network, Amy Moritz, Carmen Leff and Associates, Global Strategy Council, Public Service Research Council, Pearson and Pipkin, Council for Inter-American Security. Political leader, successful capitalist, defender of traditional values, patriot. You're an exemplar of the American dream.
I'm so proud. And I did it so well. I prepared really well. So first time I laid it down, I really wanted to get it right.
in there and protect it a little bit.
Bill, you're so gracious to have given your time.
Oh,
I mean, this is the first time I've ever been roasted, and I've really worked on it.
you did a
No, because I know, I used to see you on the television. I said, if Bill is going to MC this, I've just got to be ready.
You were ready.
Great show. Thank you, man. You were wonderful. You were very sweet. Thanks so much.
Didn't the time work out nicely?